Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today I have an absolutely amazing upload to share with you. Horrific experiences. I've got some very shocking and terrifying information on the government and their cover-ups. Before we get into all that, though, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman, Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It doesn't cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all of these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they really do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? All right, guys, like I said in the intro, a lot of really interesting stuff today. Last week sometime I shared with you guys a article out of military.com where some naval intelligence officers were looking into the USS Nimitz Tic Tacs. There are two different videos, one that was released to the public and another that was not. Some FOIA requests were made, and they were given the runaround. After the initial investigation and a couple of other extensive ones, these men were brought to Skinwalker Ranch, debriefed and such, sharing the information they could gather. And then one gentleman was kind of hit with a blue orb. Some health issues arrived. After that, a few other people had some run-ins with shadow men in their bedrooms of their homes. And another gentleman who really went in depth on his investigation for that second video. His wife and two teenage sons had witnessed a Dogman on multiple occasions around their home, staring into the windows of their home. And which is very interesting, I want to say, because on Skinwalker Ranch, people had seen a huge wolf, or a canine-like cryptid the size of a small cow. People have seen dogmen, cattle mutilations, orbs, and shadow men. So after their trip to the ranch, did these entities follow them home, or were they attracted to them after leaving the Skinwalker Ranch? I got a little more information that I want to share with you about that and those goings on. I got some great encounters, and I got a little bit more information on Dulce to share with you. So let's get into it now. We'll start with an encounter. This experience involves myself and three of my really good friends from childhood, Kevin, Ryan, and Tom, whom I am still good friends with to this day. I could not write this out without their help, consent, and experiences. The experience you are about to hear is true in every way. Regardless of whether we had been seeing things or not, the reality is we had experienced something very horrifying the night at my friend Kevin's cabin. We thought long and hard about actually sharing it or not, afraid of being ridiculed, but we are ready to share with the community, and again, we would like to share the experience with you all. One of my friends had actually suffered a nervous breakdown after the incident and needed counseling in itself. Regardless, I would like you to know also that I have been a skeptic of the paranormal, and I find it very hard to believe in many aspects, but I love to watch, listen, and read on it simply because I always love to have an open mind in life. An open mind, in my opinion, is a growing one. Whether it is the paranormal or not, someone or something was clearly there that night. During the midsummer, usually around the middle of July, myself and a couple of my good friends whom I just mentioned always made time to go up to one of my friend's family cabin up north in the forests of Minnesota. The cabin is on Vermilion Lake. We would always go for sure accompanied by my friend's dad, Kevin's dad, who owned the cabin, and sometimes a few of our dads as well. Once, we were juniors in high school and we felt mature and old enough to go to the cabin on our own finally without Kevin's dad or any other adult supervision. I would like to mention a little information in regards to my friend's cabin to help you picture the scenario. My friend's cabin is very remote and small, based upon a large-sized island. Other cabins were on the island, but the next one close to us was a solid quarter or half a mile away at least, which is my best guess, which you could get to by taking a man-made path around the island. I want to mention that to get to my friend's cabin, you had to park on a gravel road on the opposite side of the island, take his boat across the lake, about a half a mile to reach the cabin. The lake is huge. My mind always had the tendency to run around when sleeping there at night throughout the years, for it was all one level with only 2 bedrooms next to one another, a kitchen, living room connected, and a bathroom at the back of the cabin. And where you slept in the cabin, there was always at least one window in each room with no curtains at all, so it was very easy to see outside to the woods and lake. This is where my mind would always run, as I always thought something was peering in on us. I had been to this cabin a dozen times throughout my life, and nothing had ever happened. The older I got, the easier it was to sleep. We would stay a week or 4 or 5 nights. On the 3rd night during the trip, when we were finally there on our own, we had set up a campfire and had been drinking beer all night. We went out to his dock to gaze up at the magnitude of stars and enjoy our buzz. Then all of a sudden we heard something out in the water that sounded like a fish jumping out to catch a bug. We quickly looked out at the lake with curiosity, wondering where the splash had come from, having our poles ready 24/7. Thankfully, the moon was out that night, which lit up the lake. Otherwise, it would be dark as black, with there being no city lights for miles upon miles, and we would not have been able to see anything on that lake. My one friend, Ryan, began to point out, saying, what the hell is that?" after looking closely and finally spotting what he was pointing at. All I can describe was that it simply looked like a head out in the middle of the lake, just floating about, staring at us. It was maybe 3/4 worth of a football field's length out in the lake from the dock. There is no question that I could see its features. It had long black hair and very pale skin, but couldn't make out eyes, mouth, nose, or chin, as if it was just a blob of pale skin with long hair. I'll never forget the feeling that came over me. My hairs on my legs, neck and arms were stood straight up, and I was paralyzed on the inside, ready to leave that moment. But we told ourselves that it was just a loon, as these birds are very popular night drifters on the lake and do their hunting late. They also have black and white colors on their coats and hunt by diving deep into the water, holding their breath up to minutes sometimes. So it was possible that that loon had suddenly popped up from the water after hunting a bit. Or at least we tried to talk ourselves into that. All of us had the creeps and noticed it was not moving one bit, just treading water in its same place. We decided to go back to the campfire, lit it even brighter, and headed inside to drink more. I would like to mention that there is a staircase outside my friend's cabin with 8 stairs in length down to the bottom where the fire pit was and dock. At one point, I noticed that the black circular object was still there, but about 30 yards closer now, still looking as if it was staring at us. I could see easily the nose on this thing. Again, it was very pale, like it hadn't seen the sun in years. A very, very uneasy feeling came over me, and I immediately went inside and told my other friends to come in quick. Look at this, keeping our eyes glued to it at the door of the cabin. We came out to see it still there looking at us as if this head was corked up at us with its chin in the air. Nobody dared to go down to the dock anymore, and we immediately went back inside, ruling out that it was probably not a loon, because loons wouldn't have tread water in that same spot. Eventually, the current would have drifted it somewhere else in the rocking manner. For a loon to stay in that same spot for almost an hour or two made absolutely no sense to any of us. This head-like object was stiff as a board and not moving a single muscle, just staring up at us from the dock instead. There was no ripple effect at all in the lake from the object. We said it was just a log and then went back in. I could tell everyone was uneasy. A few hours passed. It was super late into the night at this point. We knew we needed sleep. Being my curious self, I looked back outside once more, and the black object had completely vanished. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, thinking that the log must have floated off or just hit shore somewhere. As we slept with the windows open that night, my other buddy, Tommy, and I slept in the living room while my 2 friends slept in the separate bedrooms with their doors wide open. Not being able to sleep, I began to hear someone or something walking around at the bottom of the stairs of the cabin, around the campfire and the bottom stair. I thought I was about to shit bricks, no question what, or whoever I heard down there was off the dock now, pacing back and forth as it made a sound of boots clicking on wood. It was as if they weren't sure what to do with themselves. It lasted for minutes. I wanted to whisper to my buddy, but froze in fear. I just kept my eyes shut and my ears fully alert. The footsteps sounded like they'd take 2 steps up the deck stairs all of a sudden, but then turned around and sounded like they were sprinting out down the man-made path. After it sounded like the steps were long gone, and a couple of minutes had passed, I woke Tommy, asking him if he heard the steps. Both of us are now sitting up. I was startled by my friend Ryan walking out of his room and saying we need to leave a minute after these steps vanished. He must have heard us talking, so felt he could come out as well. But either way, he was waking us up regardless. Something was very disturbing about his expression, and I asked him why. He woke up our other friend Kevin in the other room and said, "Let's go. Get to the boat. It's time to go." He explained to us quickly while grabbing his stuff. I will never forget it. He said when he was turning sides on his bed to get more comfortable, he saw something peeking in the top right corner of his window, and it quickly shifted out of his view. He said all he saw was one eye, ghostly white skin with long black hair. Ryan then continued, saying, "Let's go," very seriously. We locked up, and as we headed down the stairs, we saw bare footprints in the dirt, heading off into the path and all around the cabin. We picked up our step to get to the boat, not knowing what was watching us. Threw our stuff in the boat, untied it, and sped off. I didn't even think about the head in the water anymore, or to look in the water. My eyes were just glued to the island, trying to spot anything moving, but I saw nothing. When we finally got our stuff packed in the car and the boat tied up, we hopped in the car and took off. We had been driving out about 10 miles, and out of the blue, Ryan, who said he had seen this thing outside of his window, all of a sudden broke down in the car sobbing. "What was it, guys? Oh, what did I see?" We called to tell our parents what had happened on the way back, and of course Ryan was freaking out. They told us to get home safely. It was late, about 4 or 5 in the morning, but no one slept, and it was a very quiet ride home. My friend's dad, who owns the cabin, went up the following weekend and said he experienced nothing while there, but he mentioned bare footprints were still around, which he thought odd because someone was walking around his property, and that bugged him very badly. Whatever my one friend saw in the window really hit him hard. After his breakdown, he had trouble sleeping multiple nights and ended up having to go seek help for a couple of weeks and hop on some sleeping medicine. As time went on, he ended up being fine, but isn't too comfortable sleeping next to any windows, even if they have a curtain. To this day, I cannot explain what happened and why it seemed to happen to us, and cannot explain what I saw in the lake and what Ryan actually saw. Nothing has ever happened at that cabin since that night. So we were told by my friend's dad, who still owns it, which I believe him. I personally have never decided to go back to that cabin, which really makes me sad because I had a great childhood there. Tommy and Kevin both have gone back and have been fine, but Ryan still refuses to go back to this day. Thank you for allowing me to share. Not really sure about that. Initially, when I read it, I thought maybe crawler, and still could be, because people have seen crawlers with like sporadic patches of hair growing. I myself truly believe that crawlers were created by the one world government and the alien agenda in a military base somewhere underground. Dulce, Nightmare Hall, or any other of these dumbs that are around our country, or around the world at that matter. But I really do believe that these creatures were created. And I believe that it was alien and human DNA combined to create these genetic monsters. So if they possibly used a woman's or a girl's DNA to create one, it might just have hair. Very creepy experience, though. Let's get into the rest of the upload. Back in 2006, I saw the backside of a huge dog-like creature. I say huge. It could have just been a very big wild dog in the swamps outside of Davenport, Florida. I only caught a glimpse of it, and it kind of looked like Scooby-Doo in a way it was running. It was about waist high to me, and I am 6'6". Imagine, I have it in my mind, is from the back, and it was like a tangle of limbs flying past me within 10 feet. We had just gotten back from Christmas shopping, and I was helping my mom get my baby sister out of the car when the creature ran from my grandparents' backyard, which was directly on the causeway in a boating community. My stepdad yells, "Hey!" It flew past us. It was a blur as it went by. My stepdad got the best look at it before it got moving. He saw its face, and all he's ever been able to say is that it looked like a large German shepherd. But in literally 2 seconds, I saw it dive across what was easily an 8-foot ravine, both horizontally and vertically, up the hill and over an alligator-infested creek, and into the brush and trees and the marshland on the other side. Then we shined the flashlight over there, and we could only see these reddish-orange glow of these eyes. There was a streetlight pointed in the direction of the house, plus the porch light and motion light in the driveway there, so it made it harder to see when it took cover. I could barely make out a big round head in the darkness, but I remember it seemingly high off the ground for a dog. We stared at it for at least a minute, and then it turned away, and we went into the cabin. I wanted to keep looking at it, but I didn't want to stand out there alone. True story. Maybe not a cryptid, but I am convinced they are real. The world is a strange place. All right, so I just shared 2 experiences. I want to share a little bit about the Dulce thing, and then I'll jump into the information, a little more information about that article from military.com with the family saw a Dogman looking into their home. But this is very interesting. The September 10th, 1990 issue of UFO Universe related that the following under the title heading, William F. Hamilton III, Ufology, Mystery Man to Reveal Cosmic Top Secrets. Until just recently, William F. Hamilton III managed to keep up a relatively low profile so that he could continue his work in private and without needless interruptions from well-meaning and nevertheless prying eyes. Admittedly, his name is not known in every household, but the fact of the matter is that Bill is a highly respected amongst his peers. Indeed, what he has to say is as important and vital as the words as the flying ace John Lear and former Naval Intelligence Officer Bill Cooper, who have gone on record regarding the alien conspiracy. In fact, much of what Hamilton maintains is consistent with the theory that there is a massive government cover-up on the UFOs and alien visitations that reaches right up to the president's private office door, and that the U.S. military has made a secret pact with a group of aliens, only known as the Greys and Dracos. They are on Earth mutilating cattle and abducting humans for experimental purposes. Supposedly, the Greys have taken over several top-secret military bases and certain branches of the government who are working hand-in-hand with these entities to bring about total domination of the world, while a second group of extraterrestrials is here trying to protect the humans. Of a highly controversial nature, many of Hamilton's statements may seem overly radical to even his closest associates, not to mention other investigators who refuse to even seriously consider the documentation he is able to present to bolster his cause. About 10 years ago, a few scientists and engineers who worked at NASA and shared in interesting UFO abductions came together to form a group they called Project Visit, Vehicle Internal Systems Investigative Team. They studied about 130 cases of UFO abductions with the goal of constructing a model of the UFOs, their operation, and the entities of these UFOs. They found UFOs have bright interior lighting, abductors undergo a medical type examination with apparently highly sophisticated equipment, burns are suffered by many abductees, time loss from 20 minutes to 3 hours is common. Project Visit member Dr. Richard Nimtizo described crew members as 4 feet tall, hairless, gray in color, no nose, a small mouth, and large slanted eyes. The gray humanoid is emotionalist and communicates by telepathy. The Greys have earned a reputation quite different from the Nordic blondes and other reported species. Most of the abductions are done by Grey and more than one variation of the Grey. The Greys do most of the biological intervention of abductees. Tans, whites, and blues have also been reported by abductees. I have personally had some sort of encounter with what I call the whites. They are small with extremely pale skin and black wrapped around eyes. Earth-made saucers. In April of '84, Lieutenant General George Bone, Vice Commander of U.S. Air Force Systems Command, was killed while test flying a secret aircraft over the Groom Lake area, a top-secret facility located about 100 miles north of Vegas. This facility is designated Area 51. The Systems Command reputedly uses the facility to test fly spy planes, such as the SR-71 Black Hawk or its successor, the Aurora. According to a February '88 issue of Gung Ho magazine, which ran an article on Area 51, some of the craft being flown out of that test facility would make George Lucas drool. In the early '80s, a radio tech working at Area 51 reported seeing a saucer on the ground. It was some 20 to 30 feet in diameter, he said, and when it flew up, it moved silently through the air. The technician also viewed a number of wooden shipping crates marked Project Red Light. That project may have been the forerunner of Snowbird. Presently, the Air Force is trying to acquire 89,000 acres adjacent to Groom Lake's facility and to place the nearby Groom Mountains off limits to the public. Before and after the TV documentary UFO Cover-Up Live, there had been talk of an underground alien base located in the vicinity of Groom Lake test site known as Dreamland. This adds a whole new dimension on the idea of secret space program and hints of a fantastic secret program that takes us more than one step beyond. A friend of mine once moved to Riverton, Wyoming to escape from terrifying mysteries he encountered in New Mexico. He said the locals at Riverton asked him, "Are you here to work on a secret space project out at the jet airport?" Saucers were seen close to the ground in Riverton. One day my friend's truck broke down and he had to hitch a ride to town. A black Lincoln pulled up and a man dressed in black gave him a lift. The dashboard looked like a computer console. The MIB knew exactly where he wanted to be left off, in front of the post office, but my friend never told him. Alien implants. In 1980, while I lived in Glendale, Arizona, I received a call from a friend, Walter Baumgartner, who published a magazine of limited circulation called Energy Unlimited. Walter was a natural technologist. He said he had started working for a physicist by the name of Paul Benowitz at Thunder Scientific Lab in Albuquerque, New Mexico. He then proceeded to tell me the fantastic story that Mr. Benowitz had succeeded in communicating with aliens at an underground base situated near Mount Archuleta in the town of Dulce, and was close to the Colorado border and situated on the Jicarilla Mountain Indian Reservation. He told me that these little gray aliens were abducting and implanting people with a device inserted at the base of their skull for purposes of monitoring and controlling the humans. He said that the government knew about this and was involved with the activity. He also stated that the aliens feared our nuclear weapons and nuclear radiation. He told me that Paul was working on a weapon that could be effective against these creatures. Underground bases. On April 1st and 2nd, I spent 24 hours visiting with John Lear at his home in Vegas. He took out a stack of papers and had me pursue them at my leisure. His study room had walls covered with aircraft photos and certificates. There was no doubt in my mind that John loved to fly. John is a soft-spoken individual, and frequently, while visiting him, I've watched him putter in the garden. We discuss Area 51. John had some long-distance photos of the Groom Lake facility. The one thing that stood out in one of the photos was a radio telescope pointed straight up in the midst of a group of buildings. The scope was probably tracking an overhead spy satellite. He showed me the reference in February of '88 issue Gung Ho magazine that the spacecraft were being test flown from the facility. John heard rumors that the Greys had a base under the Groom Mountains. This is the one we believe to be called Dreamland. One of my sources, a leak, says DREAM is an acronym that stands for Data, Repository, Establishment, and Maintenance. John told me the story of Mr. K, whose son Robert was trapped inside a joint human-alien underground base in Utah. This Robert had apparently worked at Dulce at one time. Mr. K felt like he was given a runaround by the military in his attempts to locate his son. I learned that there are a few technical people who work in the Sandia Labs in Albuquerque who are interested in alien activity. One of the gentlemen that I spoke to, CR, knew the mysterious Colonel Ronald Blackburn, who was reputed to have said there are 600 aliens at Groom Lake facility in Nevada. CR had also investigated a U.S. crash in Gallup, New Mexico in '83. This one also investigated by Tommy Roy Blaine. I heard of Colonel Edwards at Albuquerque, who knew the AFOSI agent Richard Doty, both of whom worked with Paul in his investigations of alien activity taking place at Dulce. Doty had talked to some investigators about the government cover-up. Why? I don't know. So this is some more evidence to go along with the article from themilitary.com that I shared with you about the USS Nimitz and the Tic Tac. Most people who spent more than a day on Skinwalker Ranch brought something home with them from the property. The effect was almost universal and universally unpleasant. Even during the NIDS days, when Keller and Eric Davis spent literally hundreds of days and nights watching Skinwalker Ranch, their wives would occasionally remark waking up at night and seeing people in their rooms, or black shadows walking through the house. These post-ranch events were noticeable, but during the NID years, but they escalated dramatically while the AAWSAP BAASS program at the ranch in 2009. All 5 actively serving intelligence agency personnel who visited the ranch during the program experienced profound anomalies while on the property, and even more importantly, all 5 brought something home with them. Jonathan Axelrod and his family are the poster children for the eruption of anomalies in the home following trips to Skinwalker Ranch. For more than a dozen years following his July 2009 and subsequently trips to the ranch, Axelrod's wife and then teenage children were subject to a nightmarish Dogman appearing in their backyard, to blue, red, yellow, and white orbs routinely floating through their home and in their yard, to black shadow people standing over their beds when they awoke, and to relentless barrage of loud, unexplained footsteps walking up and down the steps of their home. What was once a normal middle-class home in suburban Virginia became an inferno of bizarre, unexplained phenomena, and Axelrod and his family were certain that the trigger for this transformation was his first trip to the Skinwalker Ranch. It was indeed lucky that Axelrod's family was and is extremely stable, psychologically well-adjusted and grounded, and prone to matter-of-fact reactions to these events. In vivid contrast to the reaction of Axelrod's family is the reaction of Juliet Witt and her then roommate to the intense poltergeist activity that erupted in their home following her 2-day visit to Skinwalker Ranch in August of 2009. The sudden eruption of poltergeist activity, during which 2 wine bottles were flung across the room, ceiling fans would turn on, TVs off and on their own, lights going off or flickering, books showing up piled at the base of their stairs, clothing moved and laid out on their daughter's bedroom floor, and no one else in the house, has continued to this day. The paranormal intrusion into Witt's home originally caused a severe emotional reaction in her roommate, and it provoked the young man to leave the house. This emotional outcome of Skinwalker transmission event was a warning to other military personnel who were contemplating spending time at the ranch. So this is a little more in-depth information on Axelrod's experience. Axelrod and I believe it was Keller and Costigan were out in Skinwalker Ranch, and they had a very strange experience happen. They seen a large oval shape. Just a lot of weird stuff happened. Well, when they returned home, this is what followed them. 10 days after the ranch episode, Keller received a call from Axelrod. He sounded puzzled as he recounted that almost immediately after his return home from Skinwalker Ranch, strange things began to happen in their home, not to him, but to his family. Axelrod recounted that on the previous night at around 2 a.m., he was asleep beside his wife, Ruth. She had seen a large black humanoid shape walking towards her in their bedroom. Ruth did not scare easily, but she felt alarmed and turned on the light and saw nothing. 10 minutes later, she clearly heard footsteps slowly coming up the stairs. She slipped out of bed and walked to the landing, but there was nothing or nobody there. Quickly, she walked to her teenage son's bedrooms and saw both were asleep. Axelrod said his wife was not completely freaked out, but the episode had concerned her. During a second call later that month, Axelrod reported an alarming escalation of anomalous activity in their home. All of the activity appeared to be directed against his family. On several occasions, Axelrod was out of town. Axelrod reported that while he was on mission overseas, his 16-year-old son, Paul, woke at night with multiple small blue orbs flying around his room. Occasionally, one would fly very close to him. According to Paul, the orbs appeared to be moving under some kind of control. When he began yelling, his mother ran into the room, but the orbs were instantly gone. Even after the bizarre night of orbs, Ruth continued seeing shadow-like figures in their home, and she routinely heard loud noises down in the kitchen after everyone had gone to bed. Ruth and Jonathan Axelrod were certain that these events had begun after he returned home from his trip to Skinwalker Ranch. Later, an even more bizarre event with strong links to the ranch erupted at Axelrod's home. Again, Jonathan was out of town on a work assignment. It was after midnight, and Ruth had turned off the lights in the kitchen and was preparing to go upstairs when her eye caught movement out in the yard. She walked over to the window for a better look and froze as she witnessed one of the most bizarre sights she had ever beheld. Standing upright and leaning against one of the trees at the perimeter of her yard was a huge wolf-like creature. She saw the creature plainly in the dim night light. It had long hair and looked like a wolf, but it was standing on its hind legs. Ruth stood paralyzed, feeling both confusion and a kind of dread. The creature appeared to be staring right at her. Its gaze was not friendly. She continued to stare at this eerie sight, trying to fathom the impossibility of an upright wolf-like creature in a quiet upper-middle-class suburban Virginia neighborhood. The creature then took one last look at her, turned, and walked slowly on its hind legs further into the tree line. Within minutes, she had lost sight of the creature. She stood there for a long while, trying to determine if she had just had a very intense hallucination or if her mind was beginning to go. The scene had been so bizarre and frightening, she decided to not call her husband or tell the kids. The kids were stable and well-adjusted, but Ruth had noticed that they were on edge from the unexplained events that had been happening in their household. Ruth went to bed and tried to put her surreal vision out of her mind. 3 days later, at around 10:30 on a bright Saturday morning, the two teenage Axelrod sons were downstairs in the living room. Paul got up to stretch his legs. A movement in the yard caught his eye, and he gasped in astonishment at the sight of a huge wolf-like creature standing on its hind legs in the backyard, staring straight at him. Alerted by his brother's gasp, Michael jumped up and saw a 7-foot-tall wolf gazing menacingly at them. The animal appeared to be completely comfortable standing on its hind legs. Both Axelrod boys felt a sense of fear. Suddenly, the beast took off running toward the tree line, its long brown blackish hair blowing in the rapid movement. The beast ran easily and fluidly on its hind legs, with long strides seemingly impossible for normal canine anatomy. Both boys stood in silence as the wolf soon was lost in the trees that bordered their property. The thick, insulated windows had prevented them from being heard any sound of the beast's transit across the yard. A couple of hours later, when Ruth came home, the boys breathlessly told their mother about the event. Ruth felt a deep chill as they excitedly described in detail the apparition identical to what she had seen a few nights previous, and that she was still hoping it was a hallucination. By the time Jonathan returned, so that's where that article kind of ended. It kind of just gave you a brief. The boys saw. Now, this is where it gets freaky. It's already freaky, but by the time Jonathan returned from his mission, the Axelrod boys had researched what they had seen, trying to find some confirmation that the bizarre event had been real. The boys became familiar with Linda Godfrey's books on Dogman, and as they described their sighting to their father, Jonathan felt a chill. Ruth's description was even more disturbing because she described the beast looking at her in a malevolent way, exuding a threatening manner. The following day, the family found numerous trees in their yard had fresh, deep scars in the bark, as if sharp objects had been drawn vertical lines down the tree. Claw marks was the definitive description that Axelrod relayed to Keller in a subsequent interview. The appearance of the upright wolf-like beast in the backyard of Axelrod's home in Virginia led to the feeling of deep ease in Jonathan's mind. He confessed being disturbed while his busy professional career in naval intelligence was intensifying with his daily engagement on multiple highly classified advanced technology projectors in his home was turning into a bizarre paranormal Disneyland. So not only did they see it, but they had physical evidence that these creatures, or this one creature, had left claw marks in the trees around their home in Virginia. Victor have always said that these creatures, there's a base in Virginia, a deep underground base. Virginia, it all fits. It's all connected. Victor was sharing that information well before this information was even presented to the public. Today's next encounter, I shared this at the live stream Saturday. I felt it very horrifying and wanted to share it as well. Again, for those people that were not at the live. I'm not sure what I saw. Names and details leading up to this encounter are not very important, so let's set the scene. Two girls, 14 years old, on an isolated eastern Kentucky mountaintop a few hours after I flipped the ATV, injuring my friend's leg. I had tried to act quickly, but I was too weak to get the ATV upright by myself. Once the both of us lifted it, we promptly flooded the engine. I helped my friend up, put it in neutral, and decided to push the ATV down the mountain with my friend occasionally tapping the brake while she sat on it. Suddenly, she halts our progress and asks me to jump on the back. In front of us was a monster of a snake. It was the fattest, angriest hog snake I had ever seen, right across our path, blocking us. By this time, it was almost dark. Because the snake was easily the size of my arm, we decided to stare it down, waiting for it to crawl away. Finally, I could push on, though I was not thrilled about walking next to the snake. I didn't have a long way to go. We had been able to coast down, or maybe my parents would come search for us. There was still plenty of light, but the sky was getting pink. Simultaneously, our heads snapped to look behind us. I am not entirely sure why we even looked. There was no sound, no twigs snapping. It had to be something instinctual because we both looked back at the tree-lined path we slowly came from. Every hair that I own is raised. My blood ran cold. I spared one quick glance at my friend, mostly because I hadn't seen it yet, and she did. She was completely frozen. I followed her gaze maybe 15 feet behind us. There sat this creature hunched over, bony, yet in a humanoid form, its skin pale white. At first I thought that was all it was. Then barely a second after the panicked observation, I noticed its face, its eyes. They were so deeply set that at first terrifying glance I thought they were just empty black pits. The setting sun struck them just enough that I could see the refraction. Its nose was flat. This hunched, naked, pale creature was studying us just the same. Its lips were pale, pink, and trembling. A horrifying thought informed me that this gaunt creature was famished or starving. As if it heard my inner dialogue, it raised its skin-wrapped skeletal hand to silence me. Then it waved its clawed finger one at a time. Then the sweetest sound I had ever heard, the ATV started. My friend must have turned away long enough to try it, so I risked it as well, jumping onto the back of the ATV, sobbing and wrapping my arms around my friend so tightly. When I glanced back, the creature was gone. Halfway down the mountain, we ran into my parents. It was pitch black by this time. We survived and talked about it later at the hospital. Turns out she didn't even know how to start the ATV, so it wasn't her. It's been a few years since this happened. I haven't been back to that mountain. I'm still friends with her, and we've talked about this many times. We theorized various possibilities as to what it could have been, but we cannot agree. I have tried to find similar encounters, even in mythology. I'm sure I have not explained this very well, but I did try my best. Does anyone have any ideas about what that was? Crawler. And tonight's final experience, another experience that I shared during Saturday night's live stream. This one as well, I thought, very, very creepy, and wanted to share it with you guys who were not there. This is the first time I have ever shared this outside of my family. It was the fall of 1996 at Salt Spring Island, British Columbia, Canada. I'd went on a camping trip with my twin brother to Ruckle Park on the south side of the island. I think that was the direction. We caught the ferry to Fulford Harbor earlier in the evening. We set off for an approximate 8-kilometer hike through county roads to a campground before it got dark. We both headed off with our backpacks. After 40 minutes of walking along this country road, the light was starting to fade and the darkness was coming. We started to hurry along, talking and planning our route. My brother suggested that maybe we hitchhike if a car passes. I thought, that's a good idea, since by the time it was getting dark, by the time we first saw a car coming, we were about 4 to 5 kilometers out. Finally, a car pulled over, and it was now dark. I was a little surprised that it was a young lady with a small child, and she said, "Hop in. I'll give you guys a ride to the park's entrance." I introduced us, and we jumped in the car. My brother got in the back seat, and I was in the front beside the driver. We headed off down the road. After just a few minutes in the headlights, we saw this creature on the side of the road. The young lady slowed the car down, and we all stared out the front window in amazement. Slowly walking across the road was this creature. It was the size of a bear and kind of looked like a wolf. It had long black fur. I could see patches of skin and muscle. It didn't look well. A short snout nose, a cross between a bear and a wolf. It looked toward the car. Its eyes reflected a little, and its muscles moved in the lights. Slowly, it walked across the road on all fours. The back legs looked like a dog's, strong. The front legs were strong as well. The body was skinny but strong. The black hair was bald in places. If I had to describe the creature, I would say werewolf. I know it sounds crazy, maybe an emaciated bear. It was just horrifying. As it crossed the road, it looked up and leapt across the ditch and up into the embankment. I didn't notice any tail, just a strong back and hind legs. Then it was gone. We all just said, "What the heck was that? Deer? Dog? Bear?" No. It was a cross between a bear and a wolf. Maybe sick. It was very scary. All I know is what I saw, and it's something I have never forgotten. After a few nights of camping, we walked past the area again where we had seen the creature. The ditch and back were about 10 feet to the bottom of a wire fence. The creature must have jumped that fence as well, probably 14 feet. I do know bears cannot jump like that. All right, folks, I hope that you all enjoyed this upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. A lot of great information for really terrifying experiences, varying in Crawler, Dogman. Some information on Dulce. But most importantly, the information on the naval intelligence officers that worked on the USS Nimitz, looking at that tic-tac information, the two videos, one not released, one released. What does that one that's not released have on it that they don't want to release it? Probably a lot. And why and how are these anomalies, these experiences, these paranormal / cryptid experiences happening to the family of the men that had gone to Skinwalker Ranch? More importantly, the information that coincides with what Victor told us about the Dogman and the deep underground military base in Virginia, where they are housed, trained, chipped, and etc. I do believe they are using the paranormal. They are using cryptids as weapons of intimidation, weapons of war, and it's part of their plan to control humanity. How do you control humanity? How do you control someone? With fear. And with that, my friends, I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is your support, after all, that keeps this channel growing and going. And honestly, what gives people a place to share their experiences, ideas, and theories, judgment and ridicule free, simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Everyone, please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, our pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real. They are out there, and they are dangerous. Share this information with the people you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.